And now joining us here on TVP World and World News tonight to discuss these economic dilemmas and exactly how to combine the reductions in the budget deficit, which at the end of June amounted to approximately 17.5 billion euros. With higher defense spending is Polish Minister of Finance, Andrzej Domański. Hello, and thank you very much for joining us on World News tonight.
Great to be here.
Now, starting off here, I believe you have some information for us that was just published. What are your expectations for Poland's economic growth just this year and in 2025?
We expect that the Polish economy will grow this year by 3.1%. And this is a substantial change since last year, when actually the Polish economy grew by 0.2%. So we are really accelerating. But what is, I believe, more important is that in next year, we expect the Polish economy to grow by 3.7%. So Poland will be back among the fastest growing economies in the whole European Union.
Which is a good record to have. Now, this week, Poland may be put under the EU's excessive deficit procedure, along with a few other member states. It has to spend around 3%, right? So what measures are you planning to reduce the deficit in the coming years? How much can you reduce the deficit on an annual basis? Some media outlets mention 0.8% of GDP. And finally, it's a triply loaded question. Will plans to raise the excise tax on alcohol and cigarettes, how much will that really achieve?
Okay, so last year, the deficit in Poland was 5.1%, so it was substantially above the 3% level. So actually the European Commission was obliged to open the excess deficit procedure for Poland. And currently we are in the dialogue with Commission to discuss the trajectory of cutting this deficit, and we are pretty optimistic. It's worth to notice that our budget incomes are really improving. Just 2 hours ago, we have published our data for June, and just in June, the VAT tax collection went up by 30%, 30. So it's really
year on year.
Year on year, of course. Mm-hmm. So it's a really good figure, and I do believe that because of accelerating economy, there will be no necessary for any substantial cuts in our spending. So far, the Polish economy is the main engine of Polish economy is the retail consumption. As you know, we made quite substantial increase in salaries for teachers, for public workers, and we see that people are spending more. What we still lack is more investments, but I do believe that in the second half of this year, and for sure in 2025, we'll see a quite substantial growth in investments as well. So basically, we are really optimistic about the Polish economy. We see that engines start to work, and therefore we expect that 2025 will be even better.
Even better. Well, and inflation is coming down, so that's also important here. Also sort of locks in some of the growth there. Now, what if economic growth comes in at a lower rate than expectations and say much less than 3% of GDP? Then what?
Actually, I do believe that there is rather an upside risk from our current forecast of 3.1.
That is too high.
I think that 3.1 is safe. Mm-hmm. And if I had to bet, I would rather say that we'll see something 3.3 rather than something below 3%. So we feel very safe, very comfortable with our current forecast. As I said, we see that income to the budget are improving. Not only VAT tax, but also personal income tax is much better than a year ago, and therefore we see that our public finances is pretty sound, and that's of course very optimistic. So This is also why I believe that next year the Polish economy will start to grow even at a higher pace.
Well, we all have our hopes up for sure. Now that brings us to the 5%. This projected to increase record high defense spending from 4% to even higher spending at 5%. Minister Sikorski, Minister Kosiniak-Kamysz say that Poland need to do this. Now, how can this be achieved without significantly raising taxes, or at least from the government revenue side, increasing the amount that the government's taking in?
Sure. We see the situation in Ukraine, and we all know that the threat from Russia is really a substantial one. So this is why we have to spend a lot on defense. And currently Poland spends 4.1% of our GDP on defense, which is the highest among all NATO members. And it will stay like that. I mean, at least at this level, but we will, next year, I see that spending on defense in our country will grow also, not only in the nominal terms, but also as a share of GDP. And this is why it's so important to accelerate the economy so that we can collect more taxes. But we see an inflow of foreign investors, new greenfield investments in our economy. We see that Poland is that we benefit a lot from the processes like nearshoring, friendshoring, and of course on the October 15th, the date of the last parliamentary election, Poland made a very decisive U-turn back to the European values. We made a U-turn from what I call a Hungarian path. So this is why more and more foreign investors are interested in investing in our country, which I believe is the best place to invest in Europe right now.
Yeah, certainly. So business confidence among manufacturing companies seems to be low, and exports are not growing as fast as they did, at least in the past. Why is the industrial output not recovering, say, faster? We also see the need for weapons for Ukraine, ammunition, heavy equipment, and we see some areas of possible joint production or manufacturing capabilities here in Poland. So I guess, to what extent is the hawkish attitude of the National Bank of Poland detrimental to the economic growth by limiting credit and marking the zloty as overvalued?
I'm the Minister of Finance, so for me it's very important to maintain the independence of the central bank, and I never comment on central bank moves and the interest rate policy. That's very important for me. Also because the foreign investors, it's important for them to maintain this independence of the central bank.
So you're not going to tell me whether the Monetary Policy Council should lower interest
No,
rates?
no, definitely I will not.
All right, well, I had to give it a try.
Having said that, what I can say is that, of course, there are some headwinds for Polish economy. The situation in Ukraine is for sure one of them. The very sluggish recovery in Eurozone countries is for sure another issue. We see very weak data from German economy recently. Industrial production down by 8 or even 9%, which is really a problem. And also for Polish companies, as Germany is our biggest trade partner. So this is of course another issue. And strong zloty is not helping our exporters. Since October 15th, Polish zloty has strengthened a lot, and we see that some export-oriented companies see it as a problem. But Minister of Finance is not interfering in currency.
In an interview here on TVP World, prominent Polish economist Witold Orłowski suggested that the political motives may be behind the central bank's decision not to cut interest rates. You just mentioned, I think, the reason why it can be detrimental to Polish business. Do you think that what do you think is the
Sure. So
reason for this?
the central bank is independent, and we see that, and we are not, as a Minister of Finance, I'm not making any comments on their decisions.
Because your government has heavily accused the governor of the central bank of politicizing the policies of the central bank.
True, that's true. But me, as a Minister of Finance, I do not comment on that. I believe it's very, very important to maintain this independence. It's also very important that inflation in Poland is going down. The recent print of 2.6%, whereas just a year ago, maybe a bit more than a year ago, we had a consumer price index growth of close to 19%. So we see that inflation is going down, and it's also helping.
And basic economics tells you that when the inflation goes down, then the rates should go down as well.
As I said many times this evening, I will not comment on central bank policy.
Okay, well, let's move on. The government has managed to unblock billions of euros from the EU. When do you expect the impact from those funds to somehow stimulate growth, and how significant will that growth be? And where are the critical areas that this money will make a difference?
Sure. We promised during the election campaign that we will unblock the EU funds to Polish economy, and we did. I mean, Prime Minister Tusk went to Brussels and very quickly managed to bring those funds to Poland, and this money it starts to work. I do expect the main impact of those funds to be seen in 2025. Actually, we estimate that our GDP will be about 0.8% higher thanks to those assets. But it's very, very important to notice that Poland is now is a big and important economy, and the funds from EU, of course, are very welcome, but we need to find other engines for our economy. This is why the green energy transition is so important. Digitalization of economy is so important. We cannot rely anymore on EU funds as a very important source of Poland and Polish economy success.
Right, and especially in light of the increasing energy demands that we have. Now, Poland is the biggest country in the region outside of the Eurozone. What is a realistic framework for Poland to adopt the single currency, in your opinion, and what conditions have to be met?
I mean, currently there are no works and no discussion about adopting euro in Poland. We think there are many reasons to be a bit cautious in this issue. Of course, there are some arguments for, some arguments against, but as I said, we are not working right now about that.
Polish Finance Minister Andrzej Domański, thank you very much for joining us on TVP World tonight. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again tomorrow night. Good night.